button. Let me push this button, and now we're ready to rock and roll. Now we got it going on. All right. Hello, 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 everybody. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate all of you being here on this wonderful, fantastic, beautiful Friday. It is Friday. So happy Friday to you wherever you are. And hopefully you're having a good one. Yeah, 1 million likes tonight. 1 million likes. And everybody do me a favor. Well, thank you there, Bishop Bit. Appreciate you. Love you right back. Everybody, let's make sure we are sharing and we are liking because we got to try to get into that algorithm. You know what I mean? So that's the goal. Hopefully we can get into the algorithm, and that would be nice because we're not there. All right. So, folks, I'm Bishop Long. You're new to this. What are you here for? I tell you what, this is our Paranormal Friday show. It's only one day a week where we talk paranormal. That's it. One day a week, and that is tonight. Before we get into the presentation, I invite you to please make sure you go to the Unexplained Network. That is where the show is currently running as well. UNX Network, UNX Network. You follow that up with a .com, and hop on over there. Some fantastic shows. Yes, I was on Ghost Adventures, the Bobby Mackey's episodes. That's when I was a lot. Well, I wasn't as heavy then, but I lost a lot of weight. Hard work. So, do I know the other Catholic bishop that smokes all this? Yes, and his name is Bishop Gregory. And I don't understand why people are so offended that he has cigars. Keep in mind, there are cardinals, there are former popes that have smoked cigars. So it's like, I don't smoke, but we're all adults. I mean, he's not a child. So, yep, but I do know him. He is a friend of mine, known him for quite some time. Okay, UNX Network, and you follow that up with a .com. Now, if you want to go to my website because you're bored and have nothing else better to do and you want something to put you to sleep, well, then just go to Bishop James Long. What if it's a haunted cigar? That's true. Holy smoke. Head on over to my website. My site is Bishop James Long. Oh, people can't behave already. Imagine TikTok, people being blocked. Say it ain't so. This is Friday night. You're trolling clergy on a Friday night. I'm sorry. Every time I say that, it is funny. I'm sorry. Of all things you could be doing on a Friday night, oh, I'm going to troll this clergy. Oh, I'm going to say something really clever. Hold on, Mom. Shut up. I'm playing. And he's probably 50 years old in the basement telling his mom to cook him some Hot Pockets. Nonetheless, I mean, Friday night, you're trolling clergy. I don't know. Go outside and catch oxygen or something. Okay, if you want to go to my website, Bishop James Long, Long, follow that up with a .com. There's a lot of information that you can head on over yonder. By the way, I have books on that site, and I want you to purchase every single book that you can see there. Purchase all of them. All of them. Put every one of them. Now we're going to wait. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. Oh, that didn't take long. I got a message. I wait purposely because of the trolling. All proceeds from my books, my work, should go to me. I'm the author. Every other author who writes a book, they make money. That's their right. It's their work. But as a community, we have decided that all of the profits from the books goes to the MKS Kids Foundation. They are an orphanage that we have been sponsoring for quite some time. As a matter of fact, what I make on TikTok goes to the MKS Kids Foundation. So we help keep the MKS afloat because they are a nonprofit orphanage, and we believe in them. As a matter of fact, later on tonight after night prayer, we're going to bring them on. And if you want to shower them with love and gifts, please do so, because they need your help. I love the MKS Kids Foundation. So let me just indulge me for a moment, please. The MKS Kids Foundation, the founder was homeless. I will admit, it was homeless at 3 years old in the streets of Uganda at 3 years old. He lived a very rough life. And so he took that pain and suffering, and he harvested all those emotions, and he started the MKS Kids Foundation, M Kind Hearts. And basically what it is, it's an orphanage. And they find children that are homeless, that are living in the streets. They give them shelter, food, clothing, and education. And so this is why we love the MKS very, very much. And I'm a very strong supporter for them. So we have donated a substantial amount of income to them, and we're going to continue doing so. Because I've always said, if you want to experience the presence of God, do something good for someone, expect nothing in return. And I love them so well. They're going to be on tonight. So they're going to be on this evening after night prayer. So night prayer is at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we bring them on TikTok. So he will come on, and then we will just shower them with lots of love and gifts. They are constantly being, unfortunately, on TikTok, they're constantly having their lives taken away because it's not quality. Sometimes they say poor lighting or whatever excuse. And sometimes they don't go on and beg. They dance. They talk about MKS. Anyway, I don't know. So they have that problem. James, just call me James. So anyway, there we go. I don't know. I'm not really for sure what that's Fulton Sheen as far as patron saint. Probably theology. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. We're going to bring them on tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right. All right. Well, as far as the different types of sins. So guys, look. Okay, tonight is the paranormal night. We're here every single night except for Saturday. We have theology Sunday through Friday. We're here for Bible study, sometimes for 3 hours. We're here for night prayer, and I stay afterwards to answer theology questions. I'm here online all the time. I go live quite often. Sundays and Wednesdays, we have Bible study at 8 o'clock. And then we stop around 9:30 or so, and then we have night prayer at 10 o'clock. And sometimes we go until 11:30. So we're here all the time answering theology questions. This is the only night of the week. This is the only night where we talk paranormal. Okay, so that's what we're going to do tonight. And then we'll answer questions a little bit later. And by the way, keep in mind, please, a lot of people sometimes think that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 chats open right now. So I have this computer and I have this computer that are running the presentation. So sometimes when I answer a question, it's not necessarily, I don't want anyone to ever feel like I'm ever being short or not answering questions. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. There's a lot of chats open and all right. And then, of course, if you want to go to the church's site, usocc.org. What is a church? A church is a group of believers who gather together, who pray for one another, who lift each other up. That's a church. A church has nothing to do with a building. A church has nothing to do with how much money they got or how much money they don't have. That's not what makes a church. Where 2 or more are gathered, I am there. Our Lord and Savior said this. So, and keep in mind, I want to remind everybody, we do not raise funds for the USOCC. We're not a prosperity gospel church. We do not preach prosperity gospel. In other words, prosperity preachers will say to you, well, the more money you put in the collection plate, the more God is going to bless you. That is a lie. That is a lie. You can't buy God's blessings. They are free. So anyone who preaches that, don't listen to them. We don't preach that. What we do, most of our clergy, are either chaplains, or they do hospital ministry, or they do homeless ministry, or they do nursing home ministry. So there we go. I'm a chaplain for the hospital. I'm a chaplain for the police department. And our clergy fund their own ministry with their own money. So I teach online English. I have a master's of education. I was a dean of a college. So we fund our own ministry. So, yeah, I don't want to put sub-chat on. Guys, look, here's the deal. I get flooded with a tremendous amount of hate messages because I have sub-chat on. You guys don't see them. I do. So I have said this many, many times. I would prefer that we allow chat to be open to everyone. See, like this person, and I want everyone to do me a favor, and there we go. Let us report this account, Fred. First of all, Fred, if you're going to insult me, spell the word correctly. That's important, because if you can't even spell the word correctly, how do you know if I'm ordained or not? And yes, I am. I'm ordained. I was ordained. I was consecrated by 5 different bishops. So you can go to bishopjameslong.com and you can actually check and look at my apostolic succession. So any church, the Roman Catholic Church says any church that has apostolic succession is considered validly Catholic. That's it's Dominus Jesus, written by St. Pope John Paul and Pope Benedict. And it means that Peter laid hands upon this disciple and that disciple and that disciple. I can show my apostolic succession to Peter. So, Fred, you are wrong. And I try to be kind, but you know, the kinder you are to these people, the more evil they become. So, but anyway, let's report. But I want to, we need to report them, get their accounts banned. And that's it. Now, TikTok, I'm going to make this very clear. I want chat open for everybody. But if you're going to come in and disrupt chat, I'm going to put sub-chat on. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. So let's just be kind. We have 6 or 7 moderators. So we have quite a few moderators. So we can handle, the issues. It's not as if we don't have moderators. So we do. So let's go from that. Okay. All right. Yep. Well, guys, please back off. Just back off. Let me handle this. Just relax. Everybody's so uptight. Let's just chill. Go grab a wine cooler. Go grab a wine cooler. Why do I have so much hate from people? The closer you get to God, the harder the devil works against you. And people want me to prove that demons exist. Look at the chat. But also, people want me to prove that God exists. Look at the chat. There's some beautiful people. And there we go. Okay, so if it gets too bad, we'll put sub-chat on and we'll be done with it. Now, Catholic 908, you got muted because you can't be nice? With the name with Catholic 908, you would think. All right. Tonight, everybody, we're going to talk about 2 topics, 2 cases that are somewhat, for some people, it might be uncomfortable, but these are possession cases that have happened, and they are quite alarming. And I'm talking about the Anneliese Michel case, otherwise known as Emily Rose, Exorcism of Emily Rose, and the Roland Doe. Well, thank you. And Roland Doe was basically, it was after The Exorcist, the movie is based on his life. So we're going to talk about those 2 cases this evening. And we're to go from there. Thank you very much for all the gifts. I appreciate that, all of you, very much. Remember, if I don't thank you, it's not because I'm being rude. I have two computers running the presentation, and sometimes I can't see what you guys are writing or typing. All right? So let's get into it. Tonight, the first part, we're going to talk about, we're going to discuss the Roland Doe case, and then we're going to talk about the Anneliese Michel. As an exorcist, I have performed 35 exorcisms on people who were truly possessed. I work with psychiatrists. I require psychological evaluation before performing an exorcism on anyone. I would never perform an exorcism on somebody ever without having a psychological evaluation, ever. And there's a reason for this. First of all, you got to understand that if an individual has, let's say, dissociative identity disorder, which is otherwise known as multiple personalities, and you perform an exorcism on that individual, you can create another identity. Or if a person is in a paranoid state and you feed into that psychosis, you could actually make things far worse. So I really don't like all these preachers who do these huge little tent rallies and all this other nonsense, and they perform exorcisms on people, and they have no idea, they have no clue what that person's psychological profile is. None. Now, and there are quite a few. Thank you, Matilda. See, Matilda Fox, psychologist. I appreciate that. Now, you have to understand that there are people that go around and they charge $5,000, $10,000 for an exorcism. I have never once charged, ever, never, and I never will. So when I go to people's homes, I never, ever send them a bill, ask them to pay for anything. It's not been easy to do that. At one time, I put $15,000 on my credit card to pay for it because Santa Claus doesn't pay for it. So it's not easy to do. But that's the thing. You cannot allow. I'm clergy. I'm a human being like everybody else. Well, I have bills like everybody else, and so the temptation could easily come in when someone says, "Please help me," and I say, "Oh, yeah, sure, I can for a couple $1,000s," and then a couple $1,000s more, and see, you give. First Peter says, "Don't give the devil a chance to work on you." So I don't work with anybody. I don't work with any paranormal team. I don't work with anyone other than psychologists because they're professionals, they're licensed. I don't work with anybody who charges. So if I dispatch a team to go into a location to do an investigation, if I ever find out that they charge, they will immediately be removed. I want nothing to do with teams like that, nothing. But it's not always easy. It's challenging. But I've always, and people, I will say this, people ask me all the time, what is the hardest part of this ministry? The hardest part of the ministry is not an exorcism. The hardest part of this ministry is having to be on the phone with somebody, and they're in Michigan or California, and it will take thousands of dollars for me to get to them. And right now, I couldn't do it. So the hardest part is hearing them on the phone crying, begging me to get to their home. And sometimes it's not always an exorcism. Many times they're terrified. I mean, there's something occurring in their home and they're afraid. And they're begging me to come help because a lot of clergy, they go to a clergy and they're like, well, you're not a member of the church. Or I've heard this a lot. Well, you don't really put a whole lot in the collection plate. I've heard this as the reason as to why some clergy won't help people. No, and you cannot do it virtually. And you can pray, and I teach people you can do what's called the epiphany of the doors, but no, because you use what's called the sacramentals of the church. Holy water, oil, incense. And so that's no. So let's get into this. Many people have read or seen The Exorcist, and quite a few people have been scared out of their minds by the story. And while the fictional tale is notoriously well remembered, there is a true story that inspired The Exorcist. So in 1949, the exorcism of a 13-year-old, Ronald Hunkeler, it wasn't front page of the news in the Cottage City, Maryland. It was a few articles were written about the incident. Most residents refused to speak about what happened. The possessed was given a pseudonym, Roland Doe, to protect his identity. But since then, the name has been released for quite some time. And went on till he lived a totally normal life after the exorcisms. But the real life exorcism of Roland Doe was enough to inspire one of the most terrifying movies of all time. So what actually happened back in 1949? And that's what we're going to have a conversation about. Yep, it was a young man. So when he was a college student at Georgetown University, William Peter Blatty saw a newspaper article that caught his attention. In 1949, the Washington Post headline read, "Priest Frees Mount Rainier Boy reported held in Devil's Grip." Thank you for sharing. See, the idea of an exorcism stuck in his mind after reading the article. And though he didn't start writing the novel, The Exorcist, until 1969, so Blatty used some elements drawn from Roland's case. But he did embellish many of the scenes to make it more terrifying. So prior to the release of The Exorcist, exorcism rituals, they were rare. They still they're performed. And after the film, in the 70s, the rite was brought to the attention of the general public. And of course, since then, the number of real-life exorcism has increased. So in the last decade, the number of certified exorcists, if you will, living in the United States has doubled. And the Catholic Church blames the increase in occurrences on demonic possession on the exact activities that you expect them to. So as the true story behind The Exorcist, Roland's life has intrigued a lot of people. However, when the details of the events were first released by the media in 1949, there were several common inaccuracies. The simplest mistake involved where the Doe family lived. And although their house was located in Cottage City, Maryland, news articles listed their hometown as Mount Rainier, Maryland. And additionally, there were some publications reported the possessed age as 14. He was actually 13 at the time of his exorcism. Those might seem like minor details, but nonetheless, it's important to note. So Roland and his Aunt Tilly, they were very close. He was an only child. He relied on the adults close to his family for friendship. He wasn't very good at making friends his own age. Thank you. So Roland's Aunt Tilly, she was very spiritual. But not, when I say spiritual, she kind of dabbled in a lot of things in the occult. She was the person who actually first introduced him to Ouija boards. And she passed away at the age of 54, shortly before Roland became possessed. Now, the family believed that Tilly was at least in part responsible for the possession, because according to the diary of one of the priests involved in the exorcism, when the spirit was asked to knock 3 times if they were Aunt Tilly, 3 knocks were heard. And the family asked again for 4 knocks as confirmation and received 4 knocks in response. So the Doe family claimed that all sorts of terrifying events occurred in their home. So ultimately, when Aunt Tilly passed away, Roland, it hurt him emotionally. So he would use the Ouija board to try to make contact with Aunt Tilly. The contact was being made, but it wasn't Aunt Tilly who was responding. And I'll promise you guys, I'll get to your questions in a moment, but I put a lot of notes on these presentations. So I'm doing a presentation. So allow me to get through the presentation, and then we'll get into your questions. So the Doe family claimed that all sorts of terrifying events occurred in their home. Family members witnessed furniture moving on its own, objects levitate, fly across the room, bed frames shaking violently, and Roland was even removed from school because his desk would start shaking violently during class. And some of the objects, the moving objects, were religious nature. Spiritual pictures on the walls would rattle. Bottles of holy water would routinely fall to the ground and break. So after his family could endure no more, they called in a priest for help. And Roland supposedly screamed, "Oh, priest of Christ, you know that I am the devil." And most people believe that this was truly the devil speaking through Roland. He spoke it actually in Latin. However, it's also possible that he picked up some basic Latin from attending church. So now there were 2 attempts over a period of months to exorcise the demons inside Roland Doe. For the first attempt, Roland was brought to a pastor's house where he was tied to a bed. And during the rite, he reached under the mattress, tore a spring from it, and slashed the priest's arms. Now, I want you to, we're talking about the 40s here. So the bed frames back in those days and the bed mattresses, those are heavy, very heavy, and springs, and he just ripped it. So during the rite, he reached under the mattress and he did this. The cut was so bad that it needed stitches, and the exorcism was put on hold. So Roland was temporarily sent home to his family. While many people believe that this episode truly happened, some researchers suggest it was no actual evidence, but I believe it did. Throughout his possession, Roland repeatedly noticed mysterious scratches on his body, and according to one source, words would appear across his chest, and it read St. Louis. So, to believing to be a sign, his family packed up, boarded a train from St. Louis, Missouri, and once there, then a reverend named William Bowdern performed the rite of exorcism on Roland between 20 and 30 times over a 2-month period. And during an exorcism, more scratches appeared on Roland's body. This time, it would resemble the words hell, evil, and then things turned violent. And Roland would fiercely resist talking in a strange voice and even breaking the nose of one of Reverend Bowdern's assistants. So despite the struggle, the exorcism was successful. The demon was eventually vanquished. And in the fall of 1949, rumors surfaced at the Georgetown University that a diary existed detailing the events of Roland Doe's exorcism. There was an anonymous psychiatrist that was present for the exorcism and had written a 16-page account of what he had seen. So complete with descriptions of the phenomena the Doe family had experienced, instructions for future exorcisms. Now, keep in mind, I was on a documentary that the Booth brothers presented. I think it was on the Sci-Fi Channel and Travel Channel. It's called The Haunted Boy. And they have, I've seen the diary of the, that they're referring to. So exorcisms can last, it depends. If you just go straight through it, after the Litany of Saints, an hour, hour and a half. But many times, I mean, that's just one, that's just the rite itself. Mm-hmm. So the psychiatrist handed the diary over to Georgetown faculty member, Father Eugene Gallagher. Well, an hour that's not very long. If you did an hour, that would be pretty fast. Because a litany of saints takes time, especially if you're chanting. That alone could 15, 20 minutes, easy. So, I mean, you're speeding through it, which I have seen clergy do it, but no, the question was, how long does it take to read through the rite? That was the question. The answer is about an hour to an hour and a half. That was the question. It was not, well, how long does it take to expel a demon? Those are two different things. So sometimes it could take months, it could take years. So anyway, the Father Gallagher, who shared it with the dean and the media, and when Father Gallagher tried to get the diary back from the dean, he was told only 9 pages remained. So there was a writer, his name was Mark. There was a summary of the viewpoints of the various participants. It says a lot how this situation was handled. Yeah, free speech doesn't give you a right to slander, though. That's actually, slander is against the law. So defamation is not protected under freedom of speech. So to psychiatrists, Rob Doe suffered from mental illness. To priests, this was a case of demonic possession. And to writers and video producers, it was a great story, for profit. Yep. So each party involved in this case had at least partially some, obviously, some people say agenda, but I don't agree. So church officials stated that sometimes when a person thinks that their family member is possessed by the devil, the true case of the disturbance is considerably, I think, more mundane. They suggest that the person may simply need to see a doctor, a psychiatrist. But in Roland's case, a lot of people will say, well, he was just a lonely kid crying out for attention. Again, firmly disagree. Based on what there was a form of levitation, there was extreme, just the strength that he displayed while under the stage of possession, ripping the spring from the mattress, and speaking fluent Latin when he might have known some Latin, but certainly he wasn't fluent in it. And in any way, so I think it's important to understand that when you're talking about Roland Doe's case, so did he spin his neck all the way around? No. Did he walk down the stairs backwards? No. But there was eyes were changing. The pupils became extremely dilated. There was markings that appear on his body. Once they began using holy water, markings would appear, scratches would appear on his body. So as they used the holy water, everywhere that the holy water would actually hit or land, there would be a terrible scratch. So, okay, as far as the regurgitation, so yes, that does occur. Not green pea soup, but what happens is when the person is under the stage of possession, the demonic is always attacking the intellect and will of the person. So if you try to give that person substance of life, food, water, then many times they will become violently ill and they will regurgitate. This is why dehydration is a real serious concern for someone who is under the stage of possession. And I think that's important to note. This is why I always have someone who's medically trained with me when I'm performing an exorcism, because I don't know if the person is going into a stroke or a heart attack. And I need to make sure that all T's are crossed and all I's are dotted. But I want to talk about, well, an IV would work, but the problem is when you're dealing with a person who is in the stage of possession, trying to put that IV into that body, the demonic is not going to allow this. And because the demonic doesn't want the individual to have any substance of life. And he did. Yeah, there was a lot of obscenities. But I want to talk about, let's go into Anneliese Michel, because this is going to take a little bit longer. And I played sound bites before, and we'll play them again. And I'll warn you when I'm getting ready to play, because they're a little rough. There are no curse words in it, but they can be overwhelming for some people who are sensitive to that. All right. So Anneliese Michel, otherwise known as the Exorcism of Emily Rose. There are some stories that frighten people for a few minutes. Strange noise in a hallway, a shadow seen from the corner of the eye, a horror movie that, watched last night before bed. But those fears usually disappear pretty quickly. The lights come on, movie in, reality returns, life is good. We'll get to the guys. Then there are stories that stay with people, stories that feel heavier somehow. Okay, there's a lot of rude people in here, and I've had enough. Subchat. Okay. Again, I've tried. I try every time to open up the chat for everybody. And every time I do it, I get burnt by people who are disrespectful. Every single time. Every time. So, I've had enough. That's the way it goes. Okay. It happens all the time. And then I get nasty messages calling me everything but my name because I have subchat on. But I left it on for 34 minutes. Actually, more than that. Enough is enough. All right. So then there are stories that stay with people. Stories that feel heavier somehow. Stories that leave behind a strange feeling long after they're over. I did try. And the kind of stories that quietly return when the house is silent, 3 o'clock in the morning. So the kind of people that make people suddenly uncomfortable, walking through dark rooms alone. Not because they believe every detail, but because something about the story feels possible. And perhaps nothing terrifies human beings more than the possibility that evil may actually exist. It does. This is why I tell people all the time, I don't get paid as being a bishop in the church. I don't receive a stipend. I don't receive a housing allowance or food allowance or a car allowance or any allowance at all. I get zero compensation from the USOCC. I've been in ministry for 25 years. I've never received a paycheck or a stipend, nothing. I do not charge. In the very beginning of the monologue, I told everybody I put $15,000 on my credit card to help people for free. And while free is great, Santa Claus doesn't pay my bills. The reason is I tell you this is because there are no ulterior motives for me telling you that possession exists. I have books, but the money goes to the MKS Kids Foundation. So I receive no benefit whatsoever by telling you this is what I've experienced. Because if I'm writing a bunch of books and making tons of money off demons and the subject matter, then you can say, yeah, but you got an ulterior motive. Well, when you don't get a paycheck, you don't get a stipend, you receive no money, you don't charge at all, you don't even take money from your books, and people still troll. They still throw stones. I tell you this because whether people like it or not, possession exists. Whether people like it or not, demons exist. And I think maybe that's why people don't want to think about demons, because it's terrifying to them. And I get it. Perhaps nothing terrifies human beings more than the possibility that evil actually may exist. So tonight we're going to talk about one of the most disturbing and controversial cases in modern history. The story of Anneliese Michel. It's not Michelle. She's German, Michel. It's a case involving exorcisms, recorded screams, religious terror, psychological collapse. And a young woman whose terrifying death still divides the world nearly 50 years later. Some people believe Annelise suffered from severe mental illness combined with epilepsy, religious trauma. I do not believe, I will say this from the very beginning, I absolutely do not believe she had mental illness. There's nothing. And I have looked through the case files. I've studied this for years. There is nothing that would indicate she suffered from mental illness. Others believe something, far darker happened inside this small German house. Perhaps the most terrifying part of all, nobody can fully prove either side. So tonight is not about a Hollywood horror. It's not fiction. It's not a campfire story. Tonight, we're going to step into something real. And before the story ends, you may begin to understand why so many people still refuse to listen to the exorcism recordings alone, which you're going to listen to some tonight. Before we talk about Annelise herself, you first need to understand the world that she was brought into. That's important because fear grows differently depending on where it's planted. So the Germany of the 1950s was emotionally wounded. Remember, World War II had ended. Scars remained everywhere. Entire cities had been destroyed. Families erased, millions have deceased, and for many Germans, faith became one of the only remaining structures that felt stable. So in a deeply religious community, churches became emotional shelters. Prayer became survival. Religion became really so important to every daily existence, especially in Bavaria and in small Catholic villages and religious household, which she was. So in those communities, please understand, religion was not symbolic. Hell was not metaphorical. Demons were not fantasy. They were real. Sin was real. Demons, damnation was real. Children were raised hearing sermons about eternal suffering, spiritual warfare, judgment, evil. Now imagine being born into the atmosphere as a deeply sensitive child. Imagine growing up believing invisible forces surrounded humanity constantly, watching, tempting, waiting. So that was the world Anneliese Michel entered when she was born in September 21st, 1952. The town of Klinenberg. It was small. It was quiet. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody. Narrow roads, Church bells echoing across the village, cold winters, dark forest surrounding the countryside. So at night, the town became extremely still. No city noise, traffic roaring endlessly, only silence. Kind of silence where every sound is amplified. Creaking floorboard, wind against glass, church bells ringing. And inside the Michel household, religion shaped everything. Morning, evening, prayers, mass attendance, religious statues, candles burning softly beneath images of saints, crucifix hanging on walls. Faith was everywhere. But there was another emotion inside the home too. Shame. That's important. And I'll explain why. So years before Annelise was born, her mother had a child outside of marriage. Today, that's not so shocking, but you got to remember, in a very conservative Catholic community, especially in Germany during the 1950s, that carried enormous social humiliation. People judged harshly. Families whispered, and according to many researchers who later studied the case, guilt and religious fear became so deeply embedded inside the emotional atmosphere of the house itself. And suffering became spiritually meaningful. So did pain, sacrifice. So as a child, Annelise reportedly appeared gentle, intelligent. Teachers described it. She was polite. She was academically gifted. And then friends later recalled that she was shy, but she was very kind. Nothing about her outwardly, it suggested horror at all. Nothing suggested exorcism or death, or she wanted to become a teacher. And she attended school regularly. She laughed with friends. She dreamed about future. I think that's perhaps maybe one of the reasons why this case feels so disturbing today. Evil stories are easier to process when the victim already seems evil. Annelise wasn't. She was just a kind person. And as she entered adolescence, those around her noticed she became increasingly devout. Religion mattered deeply to her. A prayer, and some research even later suggested that she carried enormous fear from, regarding sin and damnation. I mean, imagine the pressure of believing every wrong thought might offend God. Imagine believing hell was not just an idea, it's a real place. And people often underestimate what prolonged fear can do to the human mind. So then came the first collapse, 1968. She was 16 years old. Ordinary day at school suddenly became the dividing line between the life she had known and the nightmare that followed. So witnesses later described her suddenly freezing. Her body became rigid. She reportedly could not move properly, could not speak properly. Imagine, just the terror. One second your body belongs to you, the next second it doesn't. She eventually blacked out. I think in that time, she experienced a seizure. So when she regained awareness, she reported remember feeling overwhelming dread. Not confusion, but dread. And though something terrible had entered her life permanently, doctors eventually diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy. At first, the diagnosis seemed reasonable. The family bleed treatment would help. No big deal. Medication was prescribed. Medical supervision began. But instead of improving, darkness deepened. So temporal lobe epilepsy is important to understand because it can produce symptoms far beyond physical seizures. In some patients, it creates intense emotional experiences, hallucinations, paranoia, distorted perceptions, hyper-religiosity. Feelings of supernatural presence. And not long after the seizures began, Annelise started reporting terrifying experiences. So at night, she claimed she saw shadowy figures standing near her bed. Imagine opening your eyes in darkness and believing something is watching you from the corner of the room, not moving, just watching. She would later describe them as grotesque, demonic faces staring at her, twisted expressions, black eyes, hatred. And then came the voices. The first faint whispers, almost impossible to hear clearly, and then gradually louder, stronger, crueler. And according to Annelise, the voices told her terrifying things. Now, with possession, you have infestation, you have demonic oppression, demonic obsession. Demonic oppression is when it begins to attack you on a physical level. It's trying to break the will of the person. Scratching, biting, pinching, causing sleep deprivation. Demonic obsession is when it begins to attack your intellect. You begin to hear it. So you can actually hear the voice. What she's describing here is demonic oppression and obsession. So it's breaking down her intellect and will. She was told she could hear these voices that she was damned forever. God abandoned her. Salvation was not possible. Just stop for a moment. Imagine hearing that every single day. Lying awake at night, hearing whispers insist that your soul belongs in hell. Imagine praying desperately while believing heaven itself is turned away from you. That kind of psychological terror can destroy a person slowly. Not all at once, but slowly. So as months passed, her condition worsened dramatically. She became increasingly withdrawn, depressed, fearful. And those around her noticed changes. At first it was subtle, then disturbing. So according to reports, she began staring blankly for long periods of time. And she emotionally disconnected, other times deeply agitated. Then the sounds began. So late at night, her family reportedly heard strange sounds coming from her room. Low, guttural, growling sounds. They described it animal-like sounds, not playful or exaggerated, primitive. At times, she would bark like a dog. She would hiss, scream for hours. Imagine being her parents. Lying in wake in darkness, listening to your daughter making sounds that they're not sounding like human. Perhaps even worse, imagine not knowing whether she's mentally ill or possessed. Remember, this was a perfectly, normal family. And then something happened. According to some researchers, fear slowly consumed the Michel household completely. So Annelise reportedly became increasingly terrified of religious objects. Witnesses later claimed that she recoiled from crucifixes. Holy water allegedly caused violent reactions. Blessed metals disturbed her. The smell of incense made her sick. Now, whether those reactions were psychological or supernatural remains debated. But inside that household, the family increasingly believed something evil was happening. And once people begin believing evil is physically present, then reality itself starts changing around them. A dark room no longer feels merely dark, it feels occupied. Silence no longer feels peaceful, it's threatening. So the medical treatments continued. Doctors adjusted medication. Psychiatrists evaluated her. Nothing appeared to stop the deterioration. So instead, the behavior became increasingly disturbing. She reportedly tore clothing from her body, destroyed religious images, ate insects, bit herself. At one point, allegedly drank urine from the floor. And then came one of the most disturbing developments in the entire case, as if that's not enough. So witnesses claimed her voice sometimes changed completely. Different tones, emotional states, different personalities, times masculine, times elderly, sometimes with terrifying rage. Her family became convinced something beyond illness was happening. And eventually, the church got involved. But before we go any further, I want you to imagine something. Imagine the house late at night during the winter. Outside freezing wind moves through the Bavarian countryside. Darkness surrounds the home completely. No city lights, no noise, only silence. And inside that house, candles flicker before religious statues. A crucifix hangs against the wall. And then upstairs, your daughter sits alone in darkness, hearing voices nobody else can hear. Whispers telling her she belongs to hell. Whispers telling her God has abandoned her. Now imagine listening to her scream in the middle of the night, not knowing whether you should call a doctor or a priest or what. See, that uncertainty is where the true horror of this story begins. Because from this point forward, everything becomes darker. And in the next part of this story, the exorcism begins. So there is something deeply terrifying about losing trust in your own mind. Most people move through life with comforting assumption. They see what they see is real, and what they hear is real, and what What they feel belongs to them. But once that certainty begins breaking apart, reality becomes frightening. Because if the mind can no longer be trusted, then every shadow becomes suspicious. Every sound becomes threatening. And for Annelise, that collapse had already begun. So in the early 70s, the atmosphere inside the Michel household had completely changed. Fear was no longer occasional. It had become permanent. Here's one thing I want to say. It's very important. A lot of people will say that Annelise was mimicking the behavior of the actress who played in The Exorcist. A lot of people will say that. Say, well, she must have watched the movie and got influence. The problem is, her issues started well before The Exorcist even came out. So that argument holds no weight. So I mean, just imagine walking into that house during those years. Curtains were partially closed. Smell of candle wax lingering in the ear, religious statues there, parents exhausted from sleepless nights. Nobody laughing, no one relaxed. Because once fear enters a household and stays long enough, the entire emotional atmosphere changes. People stop speaking normally. So according to reports, Annelise's scream intensified dramatically after sunset. Not ordinary emotional outbursts, not arguments, panic attacks, screams that witnesses described as primal, animalistic, filled with rage and terror simultaneously. Imagine hearing that at 2 o'clock in the morning. Imagine hearing your daughter screaming upstairs as though something invisible is hurting her. And now imagine hearing it repeatedly for months. So over time, the family reportedly became emotionally, physically exhausted. Thank you. So neighbors later claimed strange noises could sometimes be heard from the house late at night. The growling, pounding. So Annelise herself reportedly became increasingly convinced something evil had attached to her. Literally. She would say that dark figures followed her everywhere. Demonic faces appeared around her. The voices, cruel, relentless. And researchers later suggested Annelise may have been experiencing severe psychosis combined with epilepsy and religious obsession. Others rejected that explanation completely. I do. Because according to witnesses, there were moments when her behavior appeared deeply unnatural. Moments that terrified even experienced clergy. For example, one of the earliest disturbing details involved her reaction to sacred objects. Witnesses claimed she could barely tolerate crucifixes. At times, she allegedly recoiled violently from blessed metals. There were priests would trick her and tell her this is holy water. And she would look at the priest and says, no, it's not. And then they would take out the real holy water and then she would scream. She knew what was holy water and what wasn't. Incense made her physically ill. Let me do a puzzle. There we go. So, yeah, I mean, now her physical behavior became even more disturbing. So she would sometimes crawl beneath the tables, barking like a dog. At times she would bite herself. Again, consume spiders, flies, even coal. So inside that house, nothing felt sensational. It felt terrifying. The medical world, it continued, tried to treat her, just worsened, got worse and worse and worse. So one of the first clergy members to become deeply involved was Father Ernst Alt. And Father Alt reportedly believed something beyond conventional illness was occurring. He later claimed there were moments during conversations with Annelise that deeply disturbed him. So according to some accounts, she described seeing demonic faces surrounding him while he prayed. At times, she even said, allegedly became enraged during prayer. Other times, she seemed terrified, desperate for help. So Father Alt eventually became convinced the case required formal church intervention. Now, you got to understand how serious that was. Catholic clergy are trained to approach alleged possession cautiously. Most cases are attributed to psychiatric illness. Not all. Formal exorcisms are rare, very rare. But according to Father Alt, something about Annelise convinced him this case was different. Eventually, he petitioned the church for permission to perform an exorcism. So waiting for the approval, the household continued, descending into chaos. Nighttime was unbearable. I mean, just imagine the darkness outside the Bavarian windows, cold wind moving through the countryside. You heard the church bells, and everybody in the neighborhood seemed to be living their lives just fine. And inside that house, horrible. Horrible. Religious terror, isolation. Now, according to some accounts, Annelise began describing foul smells that nobody could detect. Rotting odors, burning odors, the smell of decay. Now, psychologically, hallucinated smells can occur in neurological disorders. But inside that house, every new symptom strengthened the family's fear that something demonic was happening. So eventually the church approved the exorcism. And with that decision, the nightmare entered a new phase entirely. Because once the priest officially declared the possibility of possession, the atmosphere inside the house transformed. That happens. And imagine Annelise hearing that decision herself. Imagine already believing demons are attacking you, and then the church says perhaps they are. Well, that moment alone must have been psychologically overwhelming. From that point forward, everything became darker. So the priest assigned primarily to the ritual was Father Arnold Renz. And together with Father Alt, he began preparing for formal exorcism sessions during the Roman ritual, using the ritual. Ancient Latin prayers spoken for centuries against this evil. You got to picture this carefully. Small upstairs room, heavy silence, candles burning, religious images covering the walls, crucifix resting nearby, seated in the middle of the room, frightened young woman whose body and mind were already collapsing. The priest began praying quietly, Latin words filling the room slowly. They are measured, controlled, and suddenly Annelise begins growling. Not speaking angrily, growling. Low guttural sounds rising deep within her throat. Witnesses later described hearing noises that sounded almost animalistic, primitive, violent. At times, she reportedly screamed obscenities during prayer. Other moments, she allegedly laughed. And according to the priest, the voices began speaking. And that detail will become one of the most controversial elements of the entire case. Because according to those present, different personalities or entities appear to emerge during the exorcisms. Now, in the rite, you're supposed to silence the voice. There is no such thing as a conversation during an exorcism. You command its name and the hour of departure. You don't have a conversation with the demon or demons. Unfortunately, they did have conversations. They should not have. There were different tones, patterned speeches, emotional states. One allegedly identified itself as Lucifer. That's very common. Very, very common. Others reportedly claimed to be Judas, Nero, Cain, and a certain German leader. Now, skeptics argue that these were fragmented psychological identities shaped by religious fear. Medically, severe psychiatric conditions absolutely can create disassociation or altered vocal behavior. But what you're going to listen to tonight, it is humanly impossible to make the sounds that she made during the exorcism. Not possible. And I'll talk about that later on. Those present inside the room believed something supernatural was happening. And once that belief took hold completely, fear consumed everything. Screaming, violent screaming, spitting, growling, furniture shaking, starving young woman collapsing onto the floor while exhausted priest reciting prayers against evil. And that is the environment that existed inside the house for months. Not just one dramatic night, months. Perhaps that is what makes this case feel so terrifying. The duration, the exhaustion, the slow emotional collapse of everybody involved. Because horror is easy to survive briefly, but prolonged terror, well, that changes people. And by the end of 1975, Annelise's physical condition had already begun deteriorating quickly. She reportedly performed compulsive genuflections repeatedly throughout the day, dropping constantly to her knees hundreds of times. What would happen is the priest would be in the room and they would try to keep her down, but they kept saying something pushed her up and slammed her. She had hardwood floors. They would push her up and slam her, and the thud, the boom, I mean, it was a constant thud with her knees hitting the hardwood floor over and over and over and they couldn't keep her down. And they put their hands on her shoulders, pushing their weight down on her. But every time they did it, she would go up, and all the time, to the point where her kneecaps were completely destroyed. So it got to a point where she just could no longer stand. And her face hollowed visibly, dark circles formed beneath her eyes. She ate less and less. And according to some reports, she increasingly believed her suffering had spiritual purpose. That belief would eventually become devastating, because once someone believes suffering is holy, they may stop fighting to survive it. So we're going to talk in the next section is the exorcism intensifies. All right. Rituals exist for a reason. The solemn rite, especially rituals created to confront evil. And the Catholic rite of exorcism is centuries old. For generations, priests stood in dark rooms reciting the same Latin prayers against alleged demonic forces. Wars came and went, empires collapsed, entire civilizations changed. Yet the ritual remained. Inside a small German house in the 70s, these ancient prayers would once again be spoken. By late 1975, formal exorcism sessions began regularly. And you got to pause for a moment. Imagine what that meant for everybody involved. The family already believed something evil was attacking Annelise. The priest increasingly believed the same thing. And Annelise herself, she was fully convinced she was possessed. So once all three forces aligned, fear became absolute, because now every scream confirmed possession. Every nightmare, possession. Every emotional collapse, possession. So the exorcisms were usually conducted in a small upstairs room inside her home. And these screams were quite guttural. Yeah, it is. And we'll do a St. Michael prayer beforehand. Yeah, we'll definitely do that beforehand. So the sessions were recorded. That detail is important, because unlike many alleged possession stories, there's actual audio from this case, real recordings. There are some online that are fake. Tonight you're going to listen to one of them that's real. Decades later, people still debate about what exactly they're hearing. Some listeners hear obvious psychiatric distress. Others hear something profoundly disturbing. And there are moments in the recording where Annelise sounds exhausted and she's broken. Moments where she sounds enraged. Moments where you hear the voice emerging from her throat sounds startling, deep, and guttural. Perhaps disturbing of all, moments where she seems to speak as different entities. Now, you got to imagine that. And according to reports, Annelise sometimes threw herself violently during sessions. She would lunge towards clergy and then collapsing and sobbing. There were moments she reportedly snarled obscenities, spitting, and she screamed until she became hoarse. The priests were exhausted. But they continued the ritual, and the parents watched helplessly, but they are the ones who said no. They stopped all medical treatment because they felt that the medical treatment was not helping. One of the most terrifying and frightening aspects of this case was the duration. People often imagine exorcism as a single dramatic event. This was not. It lasted months. 67 recorded sessions, month after month of screaming, praying, fear, emotional collapse. And over time, the physical damage became impossible to ignore. Annelise reportedly performed compulsive genuflections, as I mentioned, hundreds of times. She slept very little. And on top of this, you have epilepsy, religious terror, starvation, isolation. And according to some accounts, She also began exhibiting periods of intense hatred towards the sacred imagery of anything that's sacred. She couldn't bear looking at crucifixes. She would violently regurgitate. So the priests increasingly believed that they were witnessing genuine possession. There were moments when Annelise demonstrated abnormal physical strength, despite severe malnourishment. And there were moments that they believed she possessed knowledge she should not have had. Now, whether those moments truly exceeded psychological explanation, people can debate on that. But inside that room, the priests became more convinced with every session. So outside the house, normal life continued. People went to work, children went to school, church bells rang, cars moved through the quiet streets. But inside the Michel home, reality had become something else entirely. Fear saturated every room. Nighttime became dreaded. The family did not sleep. They were exhausted in months. Then there were nights when the screaming became just unbearable. It would last for hours. So as of 1975 turned into 76, Annelise's condition worsened. Her face became skeletal. The dark circles even deepened beneath her eyes, and her physical strength declined. At times, she reportedly consumed almost no food. And despite her deteriorating condition, the exorcisms continued. Because according to the priest, the entities inside her were resisting more violently as they weakened. So that belief kept the rituals going. That's where they should have stopped. They should have never allowed her to get to where she was when she passed. Never. They should have said, no, we have to stop. She needs immediate medical attention right now. We need to get her into the hospital. We need to somehow get an IV into her, because that to me was really inexcusable. And I get it. Sometimes what happens when you're performing an exorcism or exorcism, sometimes you feel like you're almost there. You're almost at that point, and that person is almost released. And you want to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, but there gets to a point where you have to stop and say, okay, this person is seriously in trouble. And unfortunately, they didn't. And they should have. They should have. So I'm going to pull this file up here because I'm going to talk a little bit about some information about her in just a moment. Just a few facts on this particular case that really is going to shock some of you, as if this is not shocking enough. I mean, the emotional state in the final months was just too much. I mean, it was too much for the family. By the spring of 76, the situation had become catastrophic. But the rituals continued, and nobody believed they were harming her. They believed they were saving her. And so in this section here, we're going to talk, there was a point in every tragedy where people stop asking whether things are bad. They began asking whether survival is even possible. And by the spring of 76, the situation inside the Michel household moved far beyond fear. It was collapsing. Emotional, physical, psychological collapsing. Even spiritual. Everyone in the house was completely exhausted. So eventually the human mind stops functioning normally under that level of sustained terror. I believe that's what was happening inside the home of Annelise. The house no longer felt like a home. It was a battlefield. The air was heavy. It was stale. Despite her condition, exorcism continued. The exorcist truly believed that the demons were weakening. And according to Annelise herself, she said her suffering had purpose. That belief may be the heartbreaking aspect of the entire time. So the sessions themselves reportedly became more violent, as if it's not bad enough. She no longer slept. She just couldn't sleep. She would refuse food. And some people say that could be severe depression or psychosis. But at that point, every time she tried to eat, she would get sick. And so her body, the photographs in the final months, they're quite terrifying. And it got to a point where you can clearly see she was in trouble. You got to imagine the final nights. The house is silent except the distant prayer. And upstairs, a starving young woman lying weakly in her bed, exhausted. Priest continued the rites. At some point during tragedies like this, reality itself begins feeling unreal. July 1st, 1976, Anneliese Michel died. She was 23 years old. 23. She weighed 68 pounds. I want you to let that sink in. She was 23 years old. She weighed 68 pounds. An adult woman reduced almost beyond recognition. Official cause of death, malnutrition, dehydration. And in that moment, the case transformed from terrifying mystery into international scandal. And suddenly the outside world looked directly into that house. Journalists arrived, authorities investigated, questions exploded across Germany. How could this happen? Why wasn't she hospitalized? Why did the exorcism continue? Who was responsible? Could the death have been prevented? So it went eventually, because of this, it went to trial. But before we move to the trial, I want you to think about the one final image. A dark room illuminated by candles, crucifix hanging against the wall, ancient Latin prayers faded into silence, and a young woman so consumed by fear, suffering, exhaustion, despair that nobody around her could fully separate psychological collapse from supernatural terror anymore. So death changes everything. And during the months of the exorcism inside the Michel household, fear had remained private. And after the death of Annelise, that the outside world finally started looking inside that house. What they found terrified them. Because not everyone agreed that demons exist, but regardless of their belief, a 23-year-old woman had died slowly while priests performed exorcism of her body when she was 68 pounds when she passed away. Some called the priests monsters. Others defended them. Some believe Annelise was a victim of untreated psychiatric illness. Others believe modern society was refusing to acknowledge genuine evil. So authorities quickly became involved. Investigators examined the circumstances. Doctors reviewed medical history. Questions emerged immediately. Why had not hospitalization occurred? Why had the exorcism continued despite her physical deterioration? Why had intervention not happened? All these questions are absolutely legit. And eventually, criminal charges were filed against both priests involved in the exorcism. Father Arnold Renz and Father Ernst Alt, along with Annelise's parents. The charge was negligent homicide. The accusation was devastating. 23. So prosecutors argued Annelise suffered from psychiatric illness and epilepsy. They argue she required medical treatment, not prolonged rituals. And according to the prosecutor, her death could have been prevented. The defense argued something very different. They claimed Annelise had suffered from forces beyond conventional medical understanding. So the case moved into court. Journalists crowding, cameras flashing, spectators whispering. Because this was not merely a legal proceeding, this was a collision between religion and medicine, faith and psychology, the supernatural and science. The courtroom, so there was some audio, video that was played, and the courtroom reportedly heard the screaming, the growling, the guttural outburst. Some moments, voices that sounded startling different from Annelise's normal speech. Anyway, the prosecution focused heavily on medical evidence. Doctors testified about epilepsy, psychological instability, depression, possibly psychosis. They argued Annelise's condition reflects severe mental illness. And it was worsened by religious obsession. So the defense presented a radically different interpretation. The priest testified regarding her behavior. They spoke about alleged reactions to sacred objects, the voices, the growling, etc. And one of the most, I think, tragic aspects of the trial involved Annelise's own beliefs. Evidence suggested she genuinely believed her suffering had spiritual purpose. She was suffering on behalf of others. That enduring torment somehow served God. So eventually the court reached the verdict. The priest and Annelise's parents were found guilty of negligent homicide. However, the sentences were suspended. No one served prison time. The case itself never ended emotionally, not really, because even after the trial concluded, the arguments continued. And some investigators remain absolutely convinced the case represents genuine possession. So I believe certainly it was. I mean, it was. I believe it was absolutely possession, but I also believe that they were negligent. So a little bit of information about this. She was born in September 21st, 1952. She died July 1st, 1976, 23 years old. And again, the cause of death was starvation, dehydration, 68 pounds. Again, her parents stopped medical treatment, relied solely on the exorcisms. There were 67 exorcism sessions, 1 or 2 each week or more, lasting up to 4 hours. They were performed over 10 months, starting in 1975 to 1976. Now what we're going to do is we're going to play a couple of sound bites, and we will say, Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the malice and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who wander through the world seeking the ruin of souls. I will tell you now that these sound bites are legitimate. There are sound bites online that are not real. These are. So there's one that's only 13 seconds long. I have one that's for a couple hours. And then there's one for that's a little bit longer. I'm going to tell you now that for some people, this is going to be a little rough because there are some people that are sensitive to this. So you need to be aware this is no joke. And if you are uncomfortable, then you probably need to not listen. So what I'm going to do is I'll put my thumbs up when it's over. So we'll play 2 sound bites. We'll play the first sound bite. When it's over, I'll put my thumbs up. And then we'll talk about the second sound bite. So here is the first sound bite now. I want you to hear this again. You can hear the multiple pitches. It's very important, and I'll explain why. That right there. So she's German, so thumbs up. So she was speaking German. I do have the transcript of what she was saying. I'm not going to repeat it. That's very important to understand. So when you actually are able to listen to the soundbite, you can hear multiple pitches. I'm going to play this one more time. I want you to hear the ending of it very carefully. You will hear multiple pitches at once. So we're going to do it one more time. You hear that? When it goes down and up at the same time, that's multiple pitches, humanly impossible. It's humanly impossible. You cannot at the same time have a bass, which you can hear a bass in there, and you can also hear even almost a baritone and a tenor soprano voice scream it or talk at the same time. So that's impossible. There are Tibetan monks who spend their entire life doing vocal training for chanting. There is a monk that I know, 50, 60 years of training his voice, and he can do 3 at the same time. And this is a person who has trained his voice to do this. She never did this. Now the next, so that thumbs up. So the next recording, well, allegedly there were 7. So this next, there were legions. I do, yeah, I do know what she was saying, and I'm not going to repeat it. So, or what the demons were saying. Now, in this soundbite here, they're talking. They should not have done this. The priest should have never had this conversation. But I want you to hear this soundbite. It's very, very aggressive. And I want to play this for you now. Okay, it's about 48 seconds long. So I'm going to play this. Here you go.
Und des Heiligen Geistes Gottes. Des Heiligen Geistes. Und gibt das Zeichen des und spricht das Zeichen zum Ausfahren.
Now listen to this. Okay, so thumbs up on it. All right, so that is pretty powerful. Now, yeah, well, this is a person who, I mean, her vocal cords were, I mean, this is not a joke. This is someone who truly suffered. And what you heard is quite terrible. I'm not gonna go into the conversation about what they were saying. So they just, unfortunately, there were some conversations, but they, you know, there was so anyway. So I have the script, I have the transcript, but so that is Annelise. I had a good friend of mine. I still do. I have a good friend of mine, and he does movies. He does some sound effects or something. I don't know with movies. He tried to explain it to me. It's all the little sound effects and the things you hear and the special, all this other stuff. Multi-million-dollar equipment. I mean, this is like the equipment, you know. Anyway, he does big movie things, and I sent him the file, and I said, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to put this into your system, however you do it, and can you tell me how many pitches are in a particular soundbite? He said, well, that's easy. He had no problem with that. So I gave him the soundbite. He ran it through his program. Again, he does movies. He counted 32 pitches at the same time. This was not doctored in any way. This was because he has a way to find out if it's been spliced or cut or changed. That's a legitimate file that has not been altered or doctored in any way. Remember, this was 70s. And so he counted 32. Now there are some people say 37. Who cares? When you're over 10, it doesn't matter. When you're over 5, it doesn't matter. So, and remember, this guy, my friend, he works in big company or big movies. That's what he does. So for him, and it was very fast. He was able to find out the pitches and everything, and he was trying to explain this. I don't know. He tried to explain it to me. I'm like, just how many pitches? 32. 32 easy. 32. Now this was a case that I worked. This was an exorcism. He would wake up in the middle of the night, this gentleman, and he would go over by his wife, and he would just rock back and forth, and he would make this horrible noise, and it terrified her. It scared her. And I said, well, do me a favor, just get a recorder, and next time he does it, I want you just to record it so I can hear it. Let me play this for you. This is my case that I worked. Okay. This is about 42 seconds long. This required an exorcism. So I had my friend look at that as well. And within those, he counted at least 10 pitches at the same time. And so that I have hours and hours and hours of sound on that particular case. But that required, so here's what he would do. Well, one says on the very first study, it says, "I sing you." And but he would change. So there were multiple demons. There were legions. So you would hear his mouth do that, and then there would be completely different, totally different identity, a personality. There were some that were laughing and jovial, and "I sing you," and then there was other. When he would make that click, there was another demon that came through, and some of it was violent, aggressive. Screeching. So every time that click, oh, that was for that. She had suffered that for several months. And a lot of teams, she had contacted a lot of teams to help her. And there were some teams that charged and ridiculous and just took advantage. So finally, there was a team that contacted me and said, "Look, this is above us. We don't know how to fix this." So I got involved. So they had struggled with this for a while. And she was one of those people that she went to clergy in her area, and the clergy said, "Well, you're not a member of the church, so we can't help you." And nonetheless, it took a while to raise some funds to get to them, but I finally did after saving money and working, and so I took some vacation time, went there, and that took several days. Because I got a team that actually got involved. So they went, they investigated, they got growls. They got more evidence. It was very clear that it was possession. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. None whatsoever. None. Now, people ask, have I ever seen levitation? I have. I've seen a form of levitation. What I mean by that is that my first exorcism that I've ever performed, I saw someone levitate. So, and I've talked about this a lot. She was lying down this way. And it was like someone had put a rope around her waist and just lifted her. She was facing up, and she's just like did a V shape, just like this, just like that. And that's the only type of levitation that I've actually seen. But I could tell. I mean, you can tell if someone used their feet, to do that. She wasn't using her feet. She wasn't using her head to push back. It just went up that way. So she got involved playing the Ouija board. She got involved with the Ouija board. She was doing the things that she shouldn't have done. And that's how it got started with her. That was the case where her eyes went solid black. And I had always read about the possibility of that occurring, but when you actually see it, it's a different perspective. It gives you a different perspective. But it was a blackness where I could see my reflection. So that was the thing with her. I could see my reflection. And that was a time where I was completely... I was catatonic. I couldn't move. I couldn't do it. So, no, the demon possesses the body. They do not possess the soul. So, however, there are some cases where people actually, and I don't know why they do this, but they do. There are some people that purposely have the desire to be possessed. Now, some of you may say, "Oh, that's nonsense." No, it's not. I don't know if this person is on TikTok anymore, but it wasn't that long ago that I was scrolling through and I saw a person who was telling people, "Well, if you want a demon, I'm going to send them. I'll summon this demon, whatever demon you want. I'll summon, and I'll send it to you." And there were a couple thousand people in the chat room asked, "Oh, me, I want one, I want." So he would do this summoning, this summoning of demons and mentioning the name, and I summon this demon to this person, it was nonstop. It was nonstop. There was no downtime. So in other words, there wasn't like, "Well, okay, I'm just sitting here. Does anybody want one?" No, it was one person after the other. And oh, so you saw that person too? Yeah. Some people just think that, that demons are going to offer you something and offer you fame or fortune or whatever. And there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in the entertainment business who they have sold out. And so I mean, that's we know quite a few. I mean, there's quite a few of them. So, but so yeah. So if, again, the soul belongs to God. So if a person is possessed and they pass away during the exorcism, like Emily Rose, is there any indication at all that her soul would be in eternal damnation? No, no. So that's, but now keep in mind, that's different than if a person purposely wants to be possessed and they desire to be possessed and they reject God. That's blasphemy. I mean, God's not going to force people to spend eternity with him. And I've seen this. I've seen many people have this desire to summon demons, and then craziness happens. I don't get it. I don't understand. But anyway, in that case, in her case, do I believe Annelise was possessed? Yes, I do. I also believe she had epilepsy. I believe and they didn't understand epilepsy at that time. And I don't think the medication was obviously as good as perhaps it is now. But I don't, everything that I've seen and everything that I read, and I've read the case file, I was in the documentary, I've read the diary. I have a copy of the diary. Everything that I read in there absolutely, what I saw is not mental illness. Mental illness does not cause you to levitate. Mental illness does not cause a scarring appearing on your body from nowhere. Mental illness does not cause you to be able to scream in pitches of 32 pitches at the same time. That's not mental illness. Or what's called retrocognition, the ability to know someone's sins. That's not mental illness. So there were things in Annelise's case that I absolutely am convinced, based on what I read, I believe she was absolutely possessed. I also believe there was extreme negligence. And unfortunately, they should have stopped. They should have stopped it. They should have told the family, no more exorcisms. She needs medical treatment right now. And then maybe if we can get her body stronger, you cannot perform an exorcism on someone that's 68 pounds, 23 years old. That should have never happened, ever. And they should have stopped it. They should have said, no more. We're not doing any more. We got to get her body back to the point where she can fight this, because she was at a point where she couldn't fight. So, no, there was not. No, peaceful. It's a good question. There was not. So for those of you listening to this on podcast, I say goodnight to you guys. It goes awfully fast, though, doesn't it? We're going to stay for a few more minutes. I'll answer some of your questions that we have. We're going to close it out on podcast. It's just easier to do this that way. And don't forget, everybody, we do have, I'm not leaving just quite yet. Thank you very much. If you want to stick around and chat for a little bit, ask questions, you certainly can. We're going to open up the chat. Everybody, be kind. If you're not kind, I'm going to put the sub chat back on for the rest of the night, and I'll be done with it. It's ridiculous that I had to put sub chat on in the first place. But nonetheless, okay. Some people just enjoy. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I don't understand why people just can't be kind, but that's the world we live. That is the world in which we live. So, no, the demons cannot. She was possessed. Remember, the soul does not belong to demons. Now, you got to be careful, because if you go into a situation where you're purposely rejecting God and you're wanting to be possessed, like some people do, well, that's a different story. So I don't know. He does sound effects. So, like, for example, you know how a movie goes, cars or a baseball bat. I don't something. That's what he does. He takes all the sounds and he amplifies the sounds. Special effects, I guess, maybe expert. I don't understand any of that. So. Okay. So, sound engineer. Yeah. I mean, she did. I mean, she tried. She tried rebuking the spirit. Remember, her family was very devout. They were very devout. That's why when people say to me that Christians cannot be possessed, that is not true. That is absolutely not true. Anneliese Michel was a very devout Catholic. Her family were very devout Christians. So the idea that Christians cannot be possessed is wrong. Christians still have free will. A Christian can still play with the Ouija board. A Christian can still go out to locations that are known to have demonic infestation and say, I dare you to do something to me now. That's a form of invitation. Playing with the Ouija board is a form of invitation. So the idea that Christians cannot be possessed, that is absolutely incorrect. Incorrect. I have had cases where people were very devout Christians and they were possessed because they did things they should not have done. So, all right. Yeah, the part where she had visions. She had beliefs, dreams. It first started with the dreams about Mary. So she had a dream several times about Mary asking her if she wanted to continue or if she was ready to go to heaven. And that's where it all started, in the idea that she could suffer for humanity, or that she could. And I do believe there was a part of her that felt like she was accepting the suffering from, or the punishment from, her mom having a child outside of wedlock. I do believe there was a part of that, because she believed that her suffering was some form of penance for her mom. That I do believe. But unfortunately, that should have been addressed from a theological perspective. From what I saw, at least in the from what I read in the diary, there's nothing there that indicated that the clergy had a conversation with her about that. That's not to say that they didn't, but there's nothing in the diary that says they did. No, I think really the hard part is we don't know what caused the possession. So, yep, Emily Rose, that is. So Anneliese Michel, that was her name. So the exorcism of Emily Rose is loosely based on Anneliese Michel. There are many things that happen in the movie of Emily Rose did happen, at least in the cases that are that the priests say when they testified. So many of the things that occurred that you saw, there were things that she did that was not, that they didn't talk about. So, yeah, I got to be careful because I can't say too much, because, So I based on I've seen the movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and there are many things that were allegedly accurate. So, okay, for those of you listening on all the other social media platforms, remember we have night prayer coming up at the top of the hour. Hopefully you'll join us. Hold on, everybody. Remember, your value does not decrease based on someone's inability or refusal to see your worth. You are priceless. Don't let anybody tell you or convince you otherwise. Hopefully we'll see you tonight at 10 for night prayer. God bless.